While it's very fair to say that 4-13 was not a record that the Arizona Cardinals were wanting to have last year, with all things considered, 4-13 is actually a record that achieved both goals I think that the Arizona Cardinals wanted to have last year. Going into the season without Kyler Murray, even though he was going to come back at the end of the year, knowing that they probably weren't going to win a lot of games, they still were competitive. And you look at the season that they had against good teams and against bad teams in the NFL. Not only did they hold their own against a lot of good teams in the NFL, they beat a lot of playoff teams. And in fact, almost all of their wins, even though it was only 4 wins, came against either playoff teams or teams that were trying to be in the playoffs at the end of the year. Philadelphia in week 6 or game 16, week 17, 35-31 in Philadelphia. You beat Pittsburgh by 2 touchdowns in Pittsburgh. You beat Dallas in a game early in the year that was pretty much the most shocking game of the first quarter of the season, where they beat Dallas 28-16, but it almost wasn't even as close as that final score would indicate. And with that going, there is the question of now, it's probably a foregone conclusion that nobody's going to trade for Kyler Murray. He has 5 more years of his contract, starting with a $52 million salary this year, going to 45 next year, going to 55 the year after that, followed by 43.5 and $46.5 million. He can't be traded for. And this isn't like the NBA where you say people can't be traded for. In the NFL, if somebody can't be traded for, they can't be traded for. And now that we've actually seen the data on how a trade, like trading for somebody with the same sort of contract like the Browns did with Deshaun Watson, do I think Kyler Murray is better than Deshaun Watson? Yes. Do I think that constitutes trading multiple first-round picks, second-round picks, good players for Kyler Murray? No. But if you're Arizona, you do the deal because they're in a restart mode with a lot of their key positions, with how they're going to look at the defense. There's only 20 players. After this year, there's only 20 players that are under contract in 2025. And if you go all the way to the end of Kyler Murray's contract in 2028, he's going to be the only player under contract. So just keeping with that same tone, how do the Arizona Cardinals go about building their team around Kyler Murray for the future? First things first with the NFL draft this year. So the Arizona Cardinals have the number 4 overall pick. And with the way things are looking, there's a good chance they end up with the chance to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, I'm going to get into this when I talk about the Chicago Bears. I think Chicago would be the most ridiculous franchise in the world to, not only if they took Caleb Williams, because I think Justin Fields, if you actually put a team around him, could succeed in that city. But again, that will be a discussion for the Chicago Bears video. I think if Chicago passes on Marvin Harrison Jr., it's one of those situations where, however long ago it was when the Oakland Raiders had the chance to take Calvin Johnson, and they decided to take Jamarcus Russell. Now, is the situation the exact same? No. Oakland didn't have a franchise caliber quarterback on their roster when they took Jamarcus Russell. That's why they had to take Jamarcus Russell. But there were obvious signs that the pick probably should have been Calvin Johnson Jr. Calvin Johnson Jr. I don't think he's Jr. I think he's just Calvin Johnson. I'm thinking of Marvin Harrison Jr. in my head. And we saw how both of their careers played out. They should have taken Calvin Johnson. They should have taken a lot of people other than Jamarcus Russell, but they probably should have taken Calvin Johnson. And the Chicago Bears should take Marvin Harrison Jr. But if they don't, and they end up deciding to go in a stupid route and trade that pick, they're going to lose out on the best player in the draft. And if they trade the pick, they're probably trading the pick to somebody who's taking a quarterback number 1 overall and Caleb Williams. Now, Arizona could end up getting really unlucky here because the three teams ahead of him, everybody says is going to take a quarterback. But if Chicago just trades back, let's just say they trade back with Washington and Washington gives them a huge haul. Let's say they give Chicago, a Jahan Dotson, or they give them, it would be insane, but if they gave them a Terry McLaurin, along with their number 2 overall pick, along with probably future draft capital, along with probably maybe somebody else in the deal. Let's just go that route. You have the first 3 picks of the drafts probably going Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels in some sort of order, with Washington, New England, and either Chicago or some other team trading up for that pick. If Marvin Harrison is there, you have to take Marvin Harrison. Now, if Chicago does the smart thing and they take Marvin Harrison Jr., I think you have to trade the pick if you're the Arizona Cardinals. If you look at the rest of the big board, yes, there's other receivers like Malik Neighbors, like Rome Odunze, like insert high-quality caliber wide receiver here. You know what that means? That means you can get one later. So, if you're Arizona at pick 4 and Marvin Harrison is gone, you have to look at trading to somebody in the probably past number 8 range of the draft. And I think if Chicago takes Marvin Harrison, that means Atlanta becomes the most, probable team to make that trade. Because with only Desmond Ridder on the roster at the quarterback position for Atlanta, they're going to need a quarterback of the future. I think we all know Desmond Ridder is not the quarterback of the future for Atlanta. So that seems like a very easy slot for Arizona to trade back. Not only get draft capital from Atlanta, it's probably going to be a bidding war between Atlanta, between Minnesota, between Denver, between Las Vegas, between New Orleans, between, a lot of teams in that 8 to 20 range that need a quarterback. If Atlanta wins that bidding war, they're going to get a lot of draft capital to Arizona, and Arizona is still going to be able to take a receiver. Even if the Chargers, Giants, and Tennessee Titans go with a wide receiver before the Arizona Cardinals, you're still looking at an option between Keon Coleman, Troy Franklin. Even though I don't think that would be a great pick, he would still be there. Even possibly Brock Bowers, and you just pair him with Trey McBride, and you have the best tight end duo in the NFL, possibly. So with all that being said, take Marvin Harrison if you can. If not, you have to trade back. You have to. And at that point, it's probably working on the defense and hoping that you address the wide receiver situation in the offseason. Because to be honest, the wide receiver situation is pretty bleak. You're looking at Rondale Moore, Michael Wilson, and Zach Pascal as your 3 receivers. Marquise Brown is a free agent this year, and that, the free agent class of the Arizona Cardinals is something we'll get into, who they should re-sign. But that's it for the receivers. And I already mentioned Trey McBride, so that's a position they don't need to add Brock Bowers. If he's there, you can add him, and you have 2 really good tight ends. But if not, they need a receiver badly. So let's talk about the free agency class for the Arizona Cardinals this year. Just taking a look at what Arizona has already lost in the offseason, a lot of this is going to hinder on whether or not they're going to pick up the club option on Budda Baker. Now, at $15 million, I don't see why not, unless they want to decline the option and work on a long-term deal for Budda Baker. I don't see why they wouldn't accept that club option almost right now. I don't know why they wouldn't accept it as quickly as possible. Outside of Budda Baker, the main free agents are going to be Marquise Brown, are going to be, honestly, after those 2 guys, not a lot. You have your Greg Dortch in there. You have offensive linemen like Tristan Colon Castillo, like Elijah Wilkinson, like Pat Elflein, like Keith Ismail, but a it's not a lot of free agents on this team where if you lose them, you're going to be hurt. Zeke Turner is in there, and he's a good player for the Arizona Cardinals. He's somebody that they can replace. And so is pretty much everybody that's in the free agency class outside of Budda Baker and Marquise Brown. And with that said, I don't even think they should re-sign Marquise Brown, even though he's a sub-27-year-old receiver who would probably be the second, maybe third most talented receiver on this team outside of Michael Wilson, Rondale Moore, and I forget who else. But I already forget who else because this team just at the receiver position, I'm going to look at that now just so I don't look stupid. Yeah, Zach Pascal is the third best receiver on this team. So, it's just not a lot that you're looking at as a big deal in this free agency class. So now let's look at who the Cardinals need to target in the free agency period this year. So, literally, as I'm making my thumbnail, as I'm making my list of who to target, in my opinion, the Arizona Cardinals should be targeting somebody like a Chris Jones to bulk up their defensive line. Now, Chris Jones, he's basically already said that Super Bowl 53, right? 53 or 58? I think it's 58. 58 was probably his last game with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I feel like once you say that, you can't really just be like, never mind, I'll come back. He had the option picked up on him by the Kansas City Chiefs, but he still is a free agent, which honestly I don't really fully understand. I have to look into that a little bit more. But if they can get their hands on Chris Jones, the Arizona Cardinals should do it. Just give him a one-year deal, though. He cannot be signed for more than 1 year because I think Chris Jones is the perfect kind of guy to not really be on a prove-it deal, but be on a deal where he just is playing football with no other things looming over him. He's already won 3 Super Bowls. I don't know for sure if he is really just going to be like, yeah, I'm going to do everything possible with my contract to make the Kansas City Chiefs the biggest Super Bowl contender in the world. I think he's just going to look out for him. It makes me feel like I'm calling him selfish by saying this, but I feel like he's going to look out for himself, and he should. He's done everything he can for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he can't really do much more. Outside of Chris Jones, this is going to be the theme for the Arizona Cardinals, is targeting offensive weapons. You look at who is available in the offensive free agency this year, and man, it's a lot of possible boomer bust guys. Personally, I would target Josh Jacobs from Las Vegas because Arizona has a lot of money. I think Las Vegas wants to bring Josh Jacobs back, but this last year with Josh Jacobs in Las Vegas seemed really weird, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him leave. I would target Tony Pollard. I would target Saquon Barkley. I would target Dalton Schultz, Austin Eckler. I would just target somebody that they can get, and Austin Eckler probably would cost a lot of money, but he, again, is one of those boomer bust guys where if you get him and he works out really well with Kyler Murray, I think that's insane. I think that's an insane duo. Plus, they still have James Conner. That's one of the few bright spots on this team still is James Conner. And then outside of that, you're looking at possible rotational players in that wide receiver group. I would look at guys like Kendrick Bourne, Paris Campbell, maybe give me a little bit of Josh Reynolds. I would love that. If they really want to go crazy, they could go after Mike Evans. He's going to be the big fish in free agency this year for the wide receiver position. And if they get him, that's really good. But at the same time, I would do the exact same thing that I would do with Chris Jones. I would give him a 1 or 2 year contract because if they're losing, I don't think Mike Evans is going to want to be there. I think Mike Evans is really happy in Tampa Bay. He's been not only the most consistent receiver in the NFL since he got to the league. I don't know how many players you can say have had a better career almost in the history of the NFL, outside of Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, the elite receivers in NFL history. You have a hard time finding players who have had better careers than Mike Evans. Not only that, players who have had better careers than Mike Evans with as poor of quarterbacks as Mike Evans has had. Mike Evans had, for a bulk of his career, Jameis Winston. Then he had Tom Brady for 3 years, and it's like, okay, you have Tom Brady. You're going to get a lot of numbers. Then he had Baker Mayfield this year. Mike Evans is a big reason that Baker Mayfield was the third highest voted comeback player of the year this year. And so, I think Mike Evans could be a really good piece for Arizona. At the same time, I think he's really happy in Tampa Bay for as much as it would take to get him out of Tampa Bay. In terms of a contract offer, it might not be worth it. But again, he's the big fish in free agency this year, and I would target him. I'm going to go back to the defensive side of the ball. I didn't really finish my thought about Chris Jones. If they can't get Chris Jones, DJ Reader is the next one to target. They need some help. They just need more talent defensively. And I think the draft this year is going to be where they get a lot of their talent additions. But there's going to be a lot of guys available. There's going to be Chase Young available. I don't know if San Francisco is going to be able to re-sign him. I don't know. I mean, they only traded the third-round pick for him. And I think with the not lack of production that he had, but the lack of elite production that he had, I don't know if San Francisco is going to hate letting him go. If they want to do something like, hey, Calais Campbell, want to come back to Arizona for a year? Be a nice veteran presence in the locker room? I think that would be great. In the back end, if you can get somebody like a Chuck Clark from the New York Jets, if you can get someone like a Jordan Lewis from the Dallas Cowboys, Steven Nelson, another guy from Houston who could be a veteran presence. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is out there, and as much as he can be an addition production-wise for a team, he is a big subtraction when it comes to, I don't want to say teammate chemistry, but I think he really can rub people the wrong way sometimes. And I just don't know if I want, in a young locker room, I don't know if I want C.J. Gardner-Johnson being one of the main vets. Eddie Jackson also is available. He's 30 years old, so I don't know if he fits what Arizona wants. But he would be a good player for Arizona to target. I would have no issues with that at all. Let's finish this up with a basic summary. So again, their own free agents, Arizona doesn't have a lot that they need to address. The Budda Baker option, I would pick it up. The Marquise Brown looming free agency, I would just let him go. Even at 10 to 12 million, I don't think it's worth it for Marquise Brown in the lack of production he has had as a first-round pick and as a guy who was traded for by the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think it's worth it. Free agency in this period, I would target a lot of playmakers. I would target a lot of veteran presence in the defensive side of the ball. And in the draft, like I said, if you can't get Marvin Harrison, make a trade with Atlanta. Because if Marvin Harrison's already gone at 4, that means Chicago took him. And that means there's a quarterback still available, whether it's May or Jaden Daniels or even J.J. McCarthy if somebody wants to be dumb enough to draft for him. Trade that pick to Atlanta, because a lot of the teams in between Atlanta and Chicago aren't really going to be targeting wide receivers more than likely. And then, Arizona next year looks like a really good team if they continue this trend that they had to end the year. Look, 4-13, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they almost made the playoffs. I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to sit here and tell you is they were a team that competed with everybody else that stood on the other side of the field of them. And you can build on that really easily. It's really hard to build on a team that won't compete, but this is not what the Arizona Cardinals are. They competed with everybody they played against. And that's the best, that's the best quality you can have for a football team. So with all that being said, that's going to be it.